Sophie Wade is a workforce innovation specialist, an author, a LinkedIn top voice, founder of FlexCell Network. She's a globally recognized thought leader on the future of work and has over 600,000 learners across her very popular LinkedIn learning courses. Her book, Empathy Works, makes a business case for human-centric leadership, which is what we're here to discuss today. So welcome, Sophie. It's great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here, Charles. Thanks for having me.
And I see you're in the middle of a move, and time is precious, so I'll keep this short. But I'm so glad you could make time for us. As I've been reading through all your things, you have so many articles, so many podcasts, so much that you've done, and of course all the books. So I've been really interested in this for a long time, and I'm so glad we can have this time to meet. I've framed this around empathy as an advantage for companies that are experiencing hybrid work, but we don't have to stick with just that. We can talk about wherever the conversation takes us. So I wanted to just jump off with empathy as a potential competitive advantage, because most of the people I work with and deal with are in corporate real estate and they're in the workplace, and I thought that might be of interest to them.
Yes, well, empathy, the way I'm looking at it, it's not about being kind and nice. I mean, that's great if you are as well, but empathy really, the key to it is connecting with how somebody else sees and thinks about the world, and then tuning into how they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So, what they're going through, what does their view of the world mean in terms of how they're actually interacting and reacting to what's going on. And what that means is, therefore, you're just understanding more about what's going on with the other person. You're getting more information, which can then better inform an interaction, a discussion, a negotiation, and better understand what to do about it. So there's think, feel, and act. There's cognitive empathy, which is the thinking bit. There's affective, which is connecting with the sort of emotional experience piece of it. And then there's empathetic action, which is what you then do with that additional information, which, could be manipulative, but for the most part, we're just thinking about doing, with a long-term strategy, how do you use that information to have a better interaction and an overall outcome?
So, it's really a leadership essential now, or it's becoming so. And I guess it requires a lot of emotional intelligence, of course, as well.
You don't look. There are the most difficult piece, really, I think, is the cognitive piece. Really trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes as them, not as you. That's a different thing, okay? Because it's easier for me to sort of say, like, let me think about how, I would feel and think in Charles's position. No, I need to really try and connect with what you're going through and how you see the world. But the cognitive piece is the most important when you're really talking about interaction. So if you don't connect with the emotional piece of it, it doesn't matter as much. That really helps. But certainly if you coming from a background where that kind of emotional connection isn't something that you're potentially comfortable with or used to, then the cognitive piece can get you a long way there. And we're dealing with the key thing about now is that we're really, technical advances, never mind AI, has really automated away a lot of the easy work, or the simple work, the repetitive work. So we're left with a lot more of the complex work, the complicated situations, where we need to really be working together in teams. We need to be working on non-routine projects. So the work itself, the nature of work has changed. It's not linear and static and sort of predictable anymore. It's much more non-routine. It's much more team-based. And so this ability to be working together across silos in collaborative ways, that has increased substantially. There's a lot of data to show how much non-routine work has increased 40-fold over the last 20 years more so. And HBR has described the fact that collaborative work, this teamwork, has gone up 50% over the last 20 years. So, the work we're trying to do needs us to understand each other better in order to have the outcomes that are necessary for these complex problems.
I can completely relate to that, because we've done architecture, engineering, and construction, and it's very team-based. And every project is a one-off, unique thing where we have to be very cognizant of where people are coming from, and not just one client, but a whole multitude, a large number of people that are involved and all have a part to play. So it's very much a people issue all the way through in every step.
Yes. And architects
Mm,
have been in that role forever. I mean, you've always had to be designing for the people who are in the space. Now
mm,
everybody is dealing with that same situation. So this sort of, design thinking, user centric, human centric way of working as
mm.
technology has come in is something that's been increasing over the last years. And now, much more on an accelerated basis because the problems are much more complex and particularly because all the easy stuff has gone away.
Yeah, and it's harder now in some degrees, I suppose. You can focus more when you're at home or you're remote, but teamwork could potentially suffer somewhat.
I think when we understand each other better, when we listen actively, I mean, the key pieces of empathy, which are sort of, listening actively, making sure that you understood, like
Hmm.
confirming, like, Charles, is that what you meant? And maybe restating it in my own words. And then you can actually think, well, is that what I meant? And then maybe, say, well, no, actually, this. And therefore we really have good understanding. And I show respect to you, which is really important in this listening. First of all, I'm listening. But second, I'm sort of saying, Charles, I'm actually listening to you and I'm showing that I value what you say. I may not agree with you, but I'm
Yeah.
valuing what you say. And then we can have a more productive conversation because we're showing respect to each other on both sides. So,
Mm.
now in this situation where we're dealing with these different issues, we're working at such a pace, there's so much that is unpredictable. The need to really be making sure that we understand each other
Yeah, the
has
clarity.
increased substantially. Yes, exactly. Clarity. And honestly, working in offices in a sort of, let's just get stuff done because we've always done it like this, we haven't needed to be as clear as we do now. And
Mm.
with AI, with so much unpredictability, that need for clarity, and then particularly when we're working in a distributed fashion, we need to be that much more clear about what needs to get done, sort of why it needs to get done, and then the how. It depends on the person and the team. So
Hmm. Well, we've had to do that. I mean, we've ramped up having to have teams distributed across the entire globe for also almost every project now these days.
right,
Uh,
right.
so,
I can
so I was sort of
imagine.
playing the devil's advocate. I know that we've not suffered that much having to do things remotely because we have experts around the globe. But I can imagine other companies are experiencing that since COVID going forward, where things have been disassociated a little bit. Because they may have done it from a central location before, but not so much anymore. But I've just
Well, I mean, I don't know how many there's so many companies that are, regional, nationally spread out, have
yeah.
lots and lots of different offices. There are, I mean,
Yeah.
small and medium-sized businesses have one, typically maybe have one office or maybe have two locations. But bigger companies have had multiple locations for a long time. Or you
Mm,
have large centralized offices where people, they're in different buildings or they're way down the hall or another floor. And they've
mm.
not been having meetings in the same room. They may be calling up. We've been doing lots of things in a distributed fashion for years, absolutely for
That's
years.
true.
And workplace flexibility, I've been in this space since 2011. And workplace flexibility, which is being able to work in a much more flexible way because that's how work is. And salespeople are calling in from, they've been on the road forever. So we have been working in this way. We just haven't necessarily been focused on formalizing it, learning it. As I said, salespeople have really are the best, have got to grips with how best to do it so that they can work most effectively.
Mm,
And, they have sales managers who understand sort of how to keep the team connected. But when we're really looking at a sort of formalized way of working, that's when we actually need to put more, specific practices in place and really try and work out how to sort of block and tackle in the most methodical way. And that's
mm.
where managers need some more support. But we have been actually working across multiple offices, for a very long time. So there's a lot of understanding there, but when we, really try and organize it so that we can do it most effectively and managers be trained to manage for that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. But I'm just wondering, it's good that they're trained. It's good that they know how to do it. But what would that look like if they are well supported and the company is supporting them in getting this done? How does that manifest itself? How do you know if things are going the right way?
Well, one of the most important things really is to have team agreements, because what you really need, I mean, I talk about modern work as being sort of this new era of highly
Mm.
digitalized, very connected work, which is unpredictable, which sort of in a VUCA environment, that we're really needing to be leaning into the fact that it is different. And so we need to be thinking about work differently and really trying to learn the new premises of this. And one of the key things is to have an agreement among a team. So modern work, I have the principles LIFE, LIFE. So it's learning. It's all about learning, because we're always learning new ways of doing things, we're learning new technologies. Intention, so really be proactive about this. Flexibility, because our businesses need flexibility, and people, humans, appreciate autonomy, do better when they have autonomy. So that flexibility to move with the business, move with different people's needs, and empathy. So when we have that, and we have among a team, they together can work out the best way of doing things for a particular project, for the different people, for their different needs. I may be, very good in the morning. You may be terrible. So there's no point in us having a meeting, every Monday at 8 a.m. because you're just
Yeah.
not going to be your best. You're not going to contribute what we need to make the project work. So I was like, okay, Charles, how about 10? Are you up by 10? Can you have your coffee a bit earlier? Or should we do 10:30? Right? So it's understanding. So agreement, right? So we'll meet Monday mornings at 10:30 because Charles is going to be on it. And then there's going to be something else that you're going to be sort of say, well, she needs to do this, or she has, maybe Sophie wants to do her workout class on Tuesday afternoons, and she wants to
Yeah.
leave early, but then she's going to, come in from working from a different location later on. And that's how we actually get the best out of every single person on the team, by
So
really adapting.
really tuning into them and being like a tight knit band of people.
Exactly. And the more also I understand about, you understand about my workout routine, or I've got a dog that I need to walk, I want to walk at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever it might be. We understand more about each other's life. We don't have to be friends. But when we
Yeah.
actually are supporting each other and sort of understanding the cadence of each other's lives and
Mm.
working preferences, then we can really be tight knit on a project, get the work done, and maximize. I want you at your best, you want me at my best, and when we need to get flow together, like how is that going to happen? And thinking about asynchronous work. How much time do we actually need to be live like this? Right? We
Mm.
don't need to be. There are all kinds of things we don't need to be live for, and it's not effective to do that because we're sort of wasting. We're wasting time. We can do a lot
Yeah.
of things asynchronously, so we can do it through chat, or we can do it. Email
Yeah.
isn't the best. We can use lots of different tools now.
No, the
To
teams can select as they go along what sorts
exactly.
of decisions and discussions need to happen in which platform.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
consulting companies do that at the beginning of every project. They have a sort of team protocols, and they sort of write down all the different ways how they're going to communicate, what happens at lunchtime. Sometimes it
Mm.
says encourage people to have lunch. I'm like, okay, let's make sure they have lunch. But, sort of like, how are we going to be working together for this project, or just, and generally, so that
Yeah.
the different channels urgent, text is urgent, or WhatsApp is urgent, or WhatsApp for all communications, and then Slack for, whatever it might be. So you working out what the channels are, so that, and what we use for asynchronous, updates maybe via Loom or some other sort of video recording app. But all those type of things can allow us to really, one, design how we're going to work, and that's the key thing. We're needing to really be thoughtful and deliberate and intentional about how we're designing work for a project, for this team, and then we can be effective. And then all this outcomes based is really the way that we need to go. We don't, it's not about hours. It's really trying to be effective. And that's also why empathy really helps us understand each other to make those agreements the most effective possible.
Well, you mentioned, I think, did you managing energy, not time, in a way.
Yes. Well, so what I mean by that is sort of the cadence of someone. Somebody, a friend of mine, she's horrible in the morning. I mean, she's just like non-communicative. And so,
Yeah.
when I've tried to sort of connect with her, well, let's go have a coffee and I want to catch up with you about this. It's just, there's no point in doing so. So that's sort of the energy. Her energy is very low. For example, I crash between probably 3:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon. So
Hmm.
am I still working then? Yes. But I organize my work so when my brain is best was actually between 6 and 9 in the morning, because that's
Yeah.
also when there's no email coming into my inbox and I get
No,
distracted with it.
I'm on
And
the
then,
same. I'm on the same
right,
routine you are on.
And then in the
Yeah,
afternoon, I make sure that I have some work that does not require any brain energy. It might be, doing something on Canva, which is not requiring me to think deeply, but I can still be moving stuff around and being useful in and
yeah.
progressing my work. But my energy is extremely low then. And then, so understanding the cadence of your energy, and that's going to be the same. I've actually met two people now who have super amounts of energy in that middle of the afternoon slot. Extraordinary. Um, but, so you need to understanding people's energy. So it's not about the time. It's really, just sinking in with the people in your team so that you can be
Mm.
most effective. And that also
Wow.
goes
They're
to
they're all
space.
becoming they're all becoming like architecture teams and design teams
Exactly.
always were.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was actually the architecture teams who saw in the 1950s, 1960s, how much space was not being utilized. And that I think it was over 50% of the time, people were not in their cubicles and they were trying to find, there were
Yeah.
like two meeting rooms and they were all the cubicles, and people were trying to find the meeting rooms, or they were meeting in the cafeteria or whatever it was,
Exactly.
because there was already more teamwork or more
More
work.
activity based and more based on
Exactly.
meetings. Yeah.
Activity-based working, which, as we know, has been around for 35, 40 years now.
Mm, mm. Amazing. But so there it is. The teams have to know and understand each other and have a policy within their team, and
Yeah.
really understand and lay down how they're going to work together, and then be very empathetic and understanding of each one's levels of where they are at on their daily
Yeah.
rhythm.
And, and honestly, as I said, it's not about being kind and nice. It's like, if I want Charles and
Yeah,
I to work together effectively, which makes me more effective and helps
yeah.
my results and my performance and my promotion, then let me do that, because that's going to help me compete and us
Mm.
as a team to have, better results.
Yeah, yeah. There is an actual advantage in it, which will
Yeah,
translate as an advantage all the way through to the company itself. But
exactly.
where are companies undermining this effort in maybe the way they do their workplace or the policies they set in place? Are they doing anything that hurts that at all?
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
trust is really at a low, and trust is really important for engagement. Trust, is necessary for empathy so that you can connect with people, trusting relationships. Relationships are important because I need to be able to understand, or be willing to understand who you are and how you work, and sort of connect with you. Again, don't have to be friends, but
Yeah.
just be able to work out, figure out, and have the as I said, the willingness to really try and work out, what makes you tick and what's going to help you work best, so that you can support me and I can support you. So
It's at
the
least a little
undermining
degree of a psychological safety plays into that a little bit too.
Absolutely. So trust is core to psychological safety. So if you're monitoring keyboard strokes, or with
Yeah.
cameras, those type of things, monitoring computer activity. Again, if we can focus on outcomes, we can focus on results, because people do things in different ways. They use different tools.
Yeah.
A lot of younger folks are using many more productivity apps, which older employees may not be using. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter as long as the results
Yeah,
come through.
the patterns are not going to reflect whether they're productive or not if you don't. There's too varied. It's too different. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, because we haven't been designing work, and we're still, all these new tools are coming on board, and whether it's using AI, so somebody may have a very different way and time frame for actually getting something done. So,
Mm,
not judging people like that, but judging people by how they're actually completing
the
what
results.
they've actually completed. So
Yeah.
undermining that with telling, micromanaging is not going to help. Monitoring keyboard strokes is not going to help. And, not listening to employees and mandates. So the key thing about mandates, it's not allowing people to do their best work and have some autonomy. So if you're forcing people to be anywhere and not allowing them to act as an adult, and not respecting the fact that they're a grown person and they, can actually work out, sometimes with support, because we've been in offices without any direction or sort of encouragement to really try and work out what our working preferences are. But if mandating that people have to be in a certain place for honestly no good reason is
Mm,
not going to help those trusting relationships is not going to help people do their best work. So when we are encouraging autonomy, we're encouraging people to work out how they work best, how they can perform best, and supporting them and listening to them. So I think really, doing surveys, and not only doing the surveys, getting employee feedback, but then acting upon that and showing it so that employees actually see that you are acting upon that, that really helps build trust very quickly. Being responsive and supporting people so that they can perform at their best for themselves and for the company.
That's great. But I wanted to mention just for a moment. I know it's an area that I'm not that clear in, but there's sometimes also culture gaps as well, where a lot of CRE leaders, workplace leaders, struggle to interpret what the newer generations, want, or where the boundaries are. I was wondering if you could talk to that. You mentioned Gen Z in some of your articles, but uh, what is reshaping the workplace in terms of those expectations?
Yes, the real estate and workplace, they are not alone in not really connecting with what the younger employees
Yeah.
are wanting. That is really across the board. So what I would say is, first of all, each person is an individual first, and generations are sort of clumsy groupings. I would just say that because we want people to understand that. That said, there are a couple of things which do make a big difference. One is where you are in your career arc, or through your life working arc. So if you're at the very beginning, right now, that's Gen Z. So that they're
Hmm.
very early on in their career. So they don't have that much experience. So that's the key thing. They're sort of very early on, they're learning. Then you have millennials who typically sort of in the prime, they're coming up, they're very
Yeah.
focused on, you sort of building up. Then you have, later on, then, Gen X right now are sort of in the mature, seasoned, typically seasoned executive, seasoned manager. And then people who are more on the wanting to rebalance and have, me time in the golf course, or, time with their grandkids or whatever it might be, but also be doing some interesting work and giving back and those type of things. So those are that happen to be sort of what the four generations more or less look like. The other aspect is technology and what kind of technology education
Mm.
each grouping has had, and how that has affected how they view the world or the information that they've had in their hand from the get-go. For
Yeah.
example, when I was coming into the workplace, I didn't speak up in meetings because I had almost no information. The information I had was what I got from my parents, what I got from my friends, and what I got from my boss and my peers. If you have, this phone, it has extraordinary amounts of information for
Mm.
every single person. So they're coming into the workplace with a lot more information. They may not have understanding and experience in terms of how to interpret it, but they do have access to the information. One of the
Mm.
biggest challenges that we're facing right now is, thinking about that as a sort of backdrop. But for the most part, Gen Zs, the most of their experience, it's slightly changing now, but most of their experience has been through COVID.
Mm.
So you have the office is not what they're used to. That's not their sort of baseline experience. It has been
Hmm.
working from home, and it's been hybrid. So that if you ask, to return to office, the RTO, that's not actually doesn't mean that's not meaningful to them because it is going to the office. It could be GTO. So there's a very different
Yeah.
expectation in terms of, and also if you think about, I've been working from home, I've been sitting on my sofa or sitting in a nice cozy environment, and I could get, I could have whatever I want, and I can have, cheap meals because I can eat something that's in the fridge. Now you're asking me to go to a relatively sterile cubicle,
Yeah.
and I have to commute, I have to spend money, I have to spend even more money when I go out.
All that goes with that. Yeah.
All
All
that
the
goes with
inconvenience.
that.
Yeah.
And that's very different. So the expectation is the reality. And
But
also,
maybe because, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but in Asia, and you said these generations were somewhat loose groupings, but in Asia, a lot of people like to go to the office to meet other young people because we have a fairly young workforce, and they don't want to stay at home. They want to have camaraderie with people their age.
no, that's around the world. So there are a couple of things that go together with that. Is that So the first point is that the reality is very different in terms of the office. The second part of the being through COVID is that they may have a very small apartment. That's, certainly the case in some countries or some urban, places in Asia, but
Hong
also
Kong and
in New
Singapore.
York,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and or they might be in New York and they might have three flatmates. So everybody can have that crowded situation. In the same time, they had a lot of isolation. They were working from home during COVID, so they want to go into the office, but they don't want to be forced. They don't want to be mandated, because it actually doesn't make sense. Because the point is, if you're mandated, it's saying you're not an adult. And they know that they are adults, and they know that they actually do understand a lot about technology, and they also know a lot about technology than most of the people above them, if not all the people who are superior to them, who earn a lot more money than they do. And this is specifically being said, like, my boss earns 10 times more than I do, and yet he has no idea how to do X, Y, and Z. So that they are very aware of. So we think about the technology and the current situation. So the future of work, the most interesting thing to understand is that Gen Zs understand the future of work in the sense that that's what they're reacting to. They're trying to adapt to what is. They don't have any other lens. And so, but, millennials to some extent, Gen X and boomers have so many lenses and filters because of what was. So we cannot actually see what is in the same way. Now, Gen Zs don't actually have also the experience to be able to contrast and be able to explain to their bosses, whatever. Well, actually, I know it was like this, but now it's like that. So they can't show us and explain to us what the difference is. And the older generations don't understand and can't see what is. So one of the biggest challenges is that we can't talk to each other because we can't explain in the same way. And what you do have instead is bosses who are saying, well, you should do it like this. We've done it like this forever. And that's where that doesn't necessarily make sense. And often it really is not the best way forward, because we have been working very rigid, structured ways which aren't suitable for how we need to be working. Hierarchies have gone from sort of 15 layers or 10 layers. They need to be, many fewer layers, so that companies can be flexible and be able to pivot. That's what Gen Zs understand. Like, okay, because that's what we had to do also in COVID.
That adaptability. Basically, it's a lot of adaptability built in.
Exactly. And they really experienced that during COVID, because the companies were trying to survive. And so say, well, what can we do? And what skills do we have? And so those experiences they have had and this, flexible, working flexibly, business flexibility, being able to pivot, being able to respond to pivot, understanding what's possible, trying to come up with new solutions. These are amazing things that Gen Zs can contribute. And also, obviously, older generations have a lot of amazing experience and have tried and tested different things, not necessarily the same things as now. So we really need to be working together. That's the key. And so, this ability to be working together across generations with each other and listen, that's where the empathy comes in again. We have these big challenges. And so working together and listening to each other, and listening particularly to the younger generation, who they can adapt their tone a little. I do definitely admit that, but we need to be working together and listening to each other as adults.
Yeah, it requires a lot of authenticity in the approach. Amazing.
Yeah, and I think we haven't been authentic really in the office. I mean, it was, we've had it's not personal, don't take it personally, it's business. Like, what's with that? That's not where we are now. We're trying to, connect, have these trusting relationships, be able to work more authentically together. It's because we're trying to sort of say, well, what is it that Charles needs? How can we work together better?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to really try and connect with you, I need to know more about who you are. And that means, not putting up these facades and sort of pretending to be whatever. And I think that way, one of the things that's important about trust is being able to be a bit more vulnerable. And those are the types of situations which actually trigger oxytocin from a neuroscientific point of view, that help generate trust, is when like a leader asks for help. That is a particular moment when, if a leader asks for help from their team, it generates oxytocin, it stimulates trust, helps with empathy, and then the team can work together better.
Okay. Wow. God. Well, I guess we all have so much to learn from that. That must be a popular topic when you give these workshops and help
Yeah,
companies through this. Uh,
it's a
you said
lot.
that, yeah. You said at one point that empathy scales through the structure. What sort of systems turn this interaction into daily behavior?
So the way I typically try not to use, I'm sort of trying to shift from the word structure because it feels rigid
Mm.
to me. So I sort of like frameworks and flexible
Okay.
frameworks because I think,
All right.
really trying to put in, and in fact with Corinne Murray, we've been thinking we're working through frameworks that are really going to be helpful because they're flexible, because we are really trying to deal with digital transformation. And flexible
Mm.
frameworks include sort of thinking about team sports models, seasonal, understanding that we have these existing models that are flexible so that it helps us shift. So really thinking about how we can be thinking and about the shift to make this different. So we have that flexibility. We understand, let's just say, what the habits are of sports teams and how they work together. They have to be able to shift. They have to be able to be, think on the spot, but work as a team together, and then have the habits and the practices that they learn. So, in my book, Empathy Works, there are lots of empathy habits. And I've got a course coming out, which is about empathy habits. So really trying to make sure that each day, for example, you're listening in a meeting. You're trying
Mm.
to restate. I'm saying, well, okay, Charles, what did you mean by that? Then
Mm.
also being clear that
Sort
you're
of
listening. Like,
active listening, as they used to call it,
exactly, exactly.
reflecting back. Yeah.
And then also sort of saying, yes, uh-huh. So when I'm listening to you, I'll be like, uh-huh, okay, got it. So that it's clear that I'm listening and not that I'm sort of, distracted or,
Yeah.
but I am focused on you. All of these things reinforce. So if you just, start doing these little rituals, these habits, it really compounds, because if I do that, then it also encourages you to do the same. A key other ones are withholding judgment,
Hmm.
and controlling your emotions, checking your emotions. So withholding judgments means that when you say something, I don't automatically react as I would, because I
Mm.
might be like, and that includes, like, I get an email from you, I'm like, oh my God. But it's
Yeah.
checking. Am I sure that I know what he meant? Let me just check, because something might have happened on his side. Emails can be very easily misinterpreted. Texts are even worse. So let's
Mm.
just make sure I understand. That's where emojis actually can be helpful, because it sort of puts a yay. um, and then, ensuring that, so withholding judgments to make sure that I'm checking, and then my reaction can subside. I can, check my reaction, and then we don't have to have some conflict that arises, which I then have to fix later because I was the one who misunderstood. And also
Yeah.
checking emotions. So if I've come in, I've dealt with a lot of traffic. There's a tube strike in London,
Oh.
and coming to
I.
meeting, I need to calm down and just to say, hey, Charles, look, I just need a moment. And then we can start the conversation, so that and that I actually talk about box breathing. So it's something that they do in the military, which
Yeah.
is 3 or 4 times 4 seconds. And that just brings down the chemical levels of GABA, and, you can be much, much calmer. And that, if you see, conflict in a meeting, just to say, hey, let's everybody take a bio break,
Mm.
reset emotion levels, and then have a much more productive conversation and better outcomes as a result. So there are little things that can be done. Those start very, at the beginning it feels a bit contrived, but then
Mm.
after a while it just becomes part of the routine, and everything becomes more productive. And these have compounding benefits.
There's so much they could learn. It would take a long and deep process to help teach this and reinforce it. People could transform their work lives this way.
Yeah, but
Uh,
yes, I would just say that it doesn't take much. The more that you listen actively, and you're just like, kind of, yeah, Charles, great point. Huh. I hadn't thought of that.
mm.
Just that kind of validation that shows that I'm listening can change a dynamic hugely. And the restating, because there's so much. I mean, Gen Zs and older generations misunderstand each other all the time. For example, and this is really, really important, because if there's a misunderstanding, we're going to waste a lot of time. And, I go off and do something which is not exactly what was supposed to be done because I didn't understand, we're not being clear. So, for example, if I say, the hard work for Gen X, the visual is somebody working long hours at the office, burning the midnight oil. Whereas for somebody from Gen Z, they may actually be working fewer than 40 hours a week, but using lots of productivity apps and super focus. And we may achieve exactly the same thing. And maybe the Gen Z, because they've got better apps and they've got this and they're using AI more than I am, can actually, produce more or have better outcomes than I do. But then if I'm evaluating my one person on my Gen Z team and they haven't been working, 40 hours, I'd be like, well, they're not working hard. What happens then? So these are the things that really matter. And that's why sort of outcomes basis, helps get over some of those things. So we really need to be understanding sort of, as I said, this whole thing about empathizing, like how is that person working? Are they really productive? Not based on the hours they're working, but what they're achieving for the team. Are they connecting with the team? Are they, helping support the team? These are the type of things that we really need to understand, because so much language really we're talking at cross purposes a lot of the time. So that, I think, is one of the most important things, is really using empathy to ensure that we're understanding each other and evaluating each other and on the same basis.
Yeah, amazing. You know, you and I are both exploring AI quite deeply. I'm always trying to use AI not to replace people, but to augment them and have them work at a higher level than they thought they could do before. Uh, but there's that, we don't want to replace the human connection. Um, can you think of any AI or digital tools that can help to support that human connection?
Oh, yes. I mean, there are a lot of people who are using AI to actually supplement or better understand some interactions. So there was was at a charter event, and one of the panelists said, "Don't tell my wife, but I use AI. I use ChatGPT to help me interact with her, so I can actually, have a better conversation." Some people, they may need some more understanding of how or how to handle a difficult conversation. That is helping a lot of managers go into, like, what do I need to think about? What are the different things that I can say? And give them more information quickly to sort of say, this is a situation I have to deal with. This is the kind of person that I'm dealing with. What are the different things I could say? What are the different things I need to think about? That's very helpful. I know
Exactly.
a while ago, I interviewed Dr. Grin Lord, fabulous name, and she's a clinical psychologist and had developed empath.ai.
Yeah.
And one of the key places that they had were early on using AI was to help customer service people interact better for insurance claims. So when somebody's calling in really, really upset because XYZ had happened, then they would be prompted, usually afterwards, it would say, well, you could have said this, and sort of helping them learn how to interact better with somebody who's very upset. And the first interactions are the most important, because otherwise somebody either goes, gets really even more upset, or kind of like, okay, so, they're trying to help me. Let me just sort of, let's go with it and I can explain, and all those type of
Yeah.
things. So there are lots of interactions that can be supported. AI also can be better at reading facial expressions, the mouth, the eyes, because sometimes it's not very easy when you're in a meeting or in a video call to really understand, like, is somebody bored? Am I thinking?
Mm.
Am I bored? You need to. There's a lot of things, but it can be prompting, kind of, what's going on here? How can I? What might I have said? So there can be meeting recaps. Just sort of say, like, there are things you can do. So there are a lot of ways that technology, AI, can really be helpful for understanding people better and helping us empathize. I will say that one of the key things to think about that is not to rely on AI, but to learn from it. So
Yeah.
to be learning from, if AI is saying these are things you can think about, these are the different positions you need to think about, these are some of the things you can say, is to then take that on board. And so that the next time you don't necessarily need AI as much. You kind of you go, oh yeah, I got that. And oh, that I hadn't thought about. And then the next time, again, you're improving. So you're using it to learn and then improve. And then afterwards you can actually do it on your own.
It's amazing. Yeah, I've had those experiences too with resolving an argument that way or getting advice on
Right?
how to deal with a difficult situation. It's
Yeah.
amazing because people think that it has engineering knowledge, it has legal knowledge, it has medical knowledge, but they don't stop to think, well, it actually has the world's psychological knowledge as well. So
Well, yes, and that stuff it isn't. I mean, there are a lot of things it's making up, and it's trying to give you the best answer, right?
no, but
So
it's
the
it's not
knowledge.
going to be clinically correct or anything, but it can.
Well, but it's got a lot of the zeitgeist out there, and so there's a lot of relationship based information which is very, very helpful to at
Mm,
least give you a broader spectrum of what the possibilities are that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. There's a lot of work that I'm doing where I need to double check and triple check and then really go to the source. Typically I'm all going to the source material and reading that very, very carefully because it's giving you a reason, a good answer. It's not
yeah,
necessarily giving you an accurate answer. It's giving you a good answer.
yeah, yeah. No, you definitely have to double check that. And I would say even with ChatGPT 5, to harness the deep reasoning, you have to go dig a bit deeper. But it's still giving you a leg up on things. I've had
Oh
arguments
yeah.
where I've screenshot it and say, how do I win this person over without giving up my position? And it's come up with some brilliant ideas.
Oh,
You know, it's great.
yeah. So that type of stuff, that's exactly empathy, right? That's
Yeah,
exactly kind of like, how do I tap into that person? How do I understand? And then communicate and then give them some reasoning that is
yeah,
going to help them uh,
yeah,
get what they want and what I want. And so we had come up
exactly.
with more of a win-win situation. Yeah.
Look, you've been very, very generous of your time, and I don't want to keep you here all day. But if I could ask you, if and this is mostly for the people who mostly make up my connections in LinkedIn, if you had one piece of advice that a corporate leader uh, who is responsible for shaping the workplace and the strategy, uh, what would that advice be that they could try to implement in, say, the next year?
So I think, really recognizing the reality of where we are now, and it's mostly been driven by technology. We're in a very different place. We're in
Mm,
sort of the modern work era.
yeah.
And it has different parameters, it has different features, and we're working in different ways. And work needs to be designed. And if we're slotting AI in and how that's going to take place, and we're working together much more closely. And so there are many different aspects to it that we need to adapt to and for. So
Mm,
there's a huge, when we have all this technology, this talent. So I look at the balance between technology and talent. So I think it's not just about, harnessing the technology that they can use in workplace and supporting people so that when they come in, they're supported in all the best ways possible. But understanding people's needs and how work flows, activity-based working, I think is very powerful. And it's been around for a very long time.
mm,
So really understanding the people who are and the audiences they have, the customers they have, tapping in. I have empathy for sales professionals is one of my big courses on LinkedIn because it's really trying to understand like how can you connect with your customers and the audiences who are both the landlords in the spaces as well as the people that they need that the landlords need to keep happy within the
mm,
spaces. And if it's a landlord, it's like how can they best make that the most competitive space possible. And that's really by tapping into people and asking them
yeah.
and,
All
and
that.
really trying to adapt and then
Yeah.
iterating. This is not a one and done. We're moving too fast right now. So this is
Mm,
an iterative situation, getting feedback, acting upon it, trying to sort of tweak and learn. And then there's a lot that we all need to be learning. We're all in the same situation that we're learning as we go. And it's very dynamic and we're we're going to be adapting and learning for years to come. So that's why I'd sort of get on board with this. This is a different situation. We're dealing with different dynamics and we all need to be working together. And that's going to take a lot of iterations and knowledge and sharing and contributing.
wow. Thank you. Sophie, it's been a joy working and discussing things with you. I've learned a lot, and everybody else watching this will. Thank you so much for joining
Such,
me.
thank you so much, Charles, for having me. It's been a pleasure. I love the conversation and your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If you'd like to learn more, email Sophie at contact@flexcelnetwork.com or connect with her on LinkedIn.